Introducing the new 2024 All-Star. We started this development really trying to get as much feedback from the market and also the riders, really asking them some kind of questions to work out what they wanted to change about this new board, what they wanted to improve on the current model. And so we brought all that together and we had a very analytical approach to the development of the new All-Star. The All-Star is the one board for all conditions. It is designed to go on flat water, in open ocean, so really kind of rough, choppy conditions. It's also used for sprinting. It's basically the board that does it all and is available in a variety of sizes for all riders and skill levels. When we started this development, we were focusing on a couple of things. One was we wanted to try and reduce the weight of these boards, and so we started the development actually by going thinner overall. However, when we were testing these, the first impression was fairly good, but as we were going in more choppy conditions and we were testing against the reference, we really found that the thicker boards really kind of just had that advantage, especially when it's choppy. The nose can just go over the bump and doesn't get stuck as the thinner boards tend to do. We have removed some of the volume in front of the standing area. We did that to help reduce the weight. So by removing EPS and the foam here, we were able to bring down a little bit of a weight saving. We moved the standing area slightly further forwards, which was a request from some of the riders. They wanted to have a bit more space in front so they could, in sprinting, they could be a bit more free to kind of get that extra leverage forwards and put their feet further forwards. Then as we moved towards the back of the standing area, we flattened this kind of tail angle. So before it had a bit more of a curve, and we've lowered and flattened at the same time all the way to the exit. So that by bringing it down gives you more control and stability, which is ideal for when you're doing a buoy turn. Being closer to the water is always going to make you more comfortable, and especially when you're moving back in downwind, it just gives you a bit more control being that much closer to the water. So this also helps reduce weight and gives you a bit more control. One of the most kind of prominent features which sets the 24 All-Star apart from the 023 is the new rounded tail. So we found that when we brought that tail and more of a rounded outline compared to more of the parallel, straighter square tail, it was more forgiving when especially when you're in choppy conditions. If you lean on your rail, it tends to kind of be a bit more forgiving. On the kind of squarer tail, if you really lean hard, the board kind of pulls in one direction as all the water line is kind of wanting to go where you lean. This is a bit more easy to kind of keep your tracking, and you can kind of lean from left to right and you're able to kind of maintain a straight line without that sudden kind of pull. And that's also helped in downwind conditions. Again, the more rounded tail was a little bit more forgiving when you're kind of changing direction onto bumps. It was a bit easier. When we were on flat water, by having a more kind of pulled in tail, if you can imagine the extreme, which would be like the ace, you have a cleaner release. And so what we found is acceleration was a little bit quicker, having that more pulled in tail. And also the release when you're paddling is a cleaner wash. So when you're drafting someone else, there's kind of less wash from that kind of rounded tail. On the nose area, we rounded the kind of shoulder rail here and a little bit on the tuck bottom edge as well. So one of the feedbacks was when you're in kind of side chop, having obviously a kind of fairly thick voluminous nose tends to get kind of pushed around a bit when you're in side kind of conditions. So by rounding this rail off here, both the deck and the bottom, it was a little bit more forgiving. You could stay kind of on course and it wouldn't pull you so easily. So that rounded rail was more forgiving to give you a bit more control in side conditions and in side wind. So the All-Star for a number of years now has had this kind of pronounced V in the middle of the bottom and then a concave on the side. This year we've slightly reduced the V, so it's a little bit more flatter. It still has V on the bottom, which gives you that kind of acceleration and gets up going very quickly. But by having a little bit more of a reduced V from kind of here towards the tail, just helped improve the overall stability of the board. As we get to behind the fin box, we've added a little bit more V. So when you're kind of surfing or when you're stepping back in downwind, having more V out of the tail allows you to kind of change direction and again gives you a bit more of a cleaner release. One of the other changes we did is we wanted to improve the drainage of the All-Star. So last year we moved the drainage into the center of the board away from the rails, and that just made it a bit more comfortable. You weren't standing on top of a drainage hole, and when you're leaning on rail there wasn't water flooding in from the rails. So it was a good move, but we've increased on the bottom the amount of area that the water can kind of pass through. So we've increased the speed of the drainage by having a more open area on the bottom and also increasing the diameter of the actual tube. So now when there's water in the deck, there's a bigger area to help kind of flush the water out, and then on the bottom there's a wider area for the water to kind of flush out that much quicker. So these are some of the changes. They're refinements to the All-Star. This board has won probably more titles than any other board in the industry. So we're always very careful not to kind of have too much kind of big changes, as this board is very much well liked and the riders trust and rely on this model. But these tweaks with the tail outline, again, some refinements in the standing area to reduce the weight, improve drainage and a little bit more stability on the bottom, and then having that more rounded rail forwards just helps kind of elevate that performance to the next level, improving, again, your side wind control with a more rounded rail, reduced weight from both the nose and the standing, faster drainage from the middle, and then at the tail, again, a bit more forgiving in choppy conditions, upwind, downwind, and overall a cleaner release from the tail. So one big question now that we've got 3 boards in the race range, we have the All-Star, the Gen R and the Sprint. A lot of people are asking, does the Gen R replace the All-Star? What's the direction? And the All-Star is still very much the most versatile board. It is got the widest appeal because it is suited to all conditions and all riders. So now we have the smallest model is a 1420.5 on the All-Star. We've added a 21.5, which was a big request. People felt that from the 20.5 to the 23 there was too big a gap. So now there's a 21.5, then you have the 23, the 24.5, 26 and the 28. So all of the models within the All-Star range are the new shape. And again, the All-Star is the board that does it all and really kind of is the one that you're going to still see the riders use in a lot of the competitions just because it has that versatility. The Gen R is our flat deck board. So the All-Star and the Sprint being dug out means that you're lower down, you're closer to the water, so you have a lower center of gravity. But the Gen R being a flat deck gives you a bit more freedom to move around on the board. So you're not kind of sat inside it, you're on top, which a lot of people actually prefer. It's a preference thing. It's ideal for kind of tech racing where sometimes you need to move around very quickly. You need to kind of sink the tail and do a buoy turn. It drains much faster, the Gen R. So when you are doing these turns, if you're surfing as well, the water gets out much quicker because you don't have the sides of a dugout that kind of keeps the water inside. So the Gen R is really an ideal board for tech racing and surfing. It also is about 3 centimeters thinner overall. So being thinner means that it's generally lighter weight, it's a little bit less affected in side chop, and generally kind of more suited again to the tech racing and surfing style of boards. It also has a great appeal to paddlers that are getting into the sport and feel a little bit intimidated by a dugout. That flat deck is generally easier to get back on the board. You can pull yourself up and it's less of a challenge. So the bigger models definitely appeal to that kind of entry-level racer as well. And then the Sprint is still a very much focused flat water model that is by far the fastest. It's the most efficient because of that really pulled in narrow nose, but it is more limited in terms of choppier conditions. It's more challenging, so it is more of a focused flat water and longer distance board. If you're going to do a distance race that is majority kind of flat water based, then the Sprint by far is going to be the best board. So that's an overall wrap up of the race range. All-Star's most versatile, Gen R for tech racing and surfing. The Sprint is your flat water machine for ultra distance and really kind of that maximum efficiency.